The world watched in astonishment. Aleppo, once a symbol of Assad's brutal grip on Syria, had fallen. Rebel forces, in a lightning offensive, had ripped the city from the regime's control. This was not just a military defeat, this was a humiliation, a crushing blow to Bashar al-Assad's regime. The man who had vowed to crush the rebellion was now facing the most serious challenge to his rule. The fall of Aleppo sent shockwaves through the region. It signaled a potential turning point in the brutal Syrian civil war. The speed of the collapse was staggering. In a matter of days, rebel fighters had overrun government positions, seizing control of key strategic points. The Syrian army, once considered invincible, seemed powerless to stop the onslaught. Images of fleeing soldiers abandoning their weapons and uniforms filled television screens worldwide. The message was clear. Assad was losing his grip on power. The world had witnessed this kind of devastation before in Aleppo. In 2016, the city became a symbol of the horrors of the Syrian conflict. The relentless bombardment by Syrian and Russian forces reduced entire neighborhoods to rubble. Thousands of civilians were killed and the world recoiled in horror. The recapture of Aleppo by Assad with the help of Russian air power was seen as a turning point in the war, but the victory proved to be short-lived. The rebellion, though weakened, was not extinguished. It smoldered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike back. That moment came in November 2024. The rebel offensive, meticulously planned and executed, caught Assad's forces off guard. The Syrian army, weakened by years of war and corruption, crumbled under the assault. The rebel offensive was a masterpiece of military planning and execution. It began on November 27, 2024, with coordinated attacks on government positions around Aleppo. The rebels, a coalition of groups opposed to Assad's rule, had been preparing for months. They knew the terrain and their enemy. The attack was swift and brutal. Armed with advanced weaponry, rebels stormed government strongholds. The Syrian army put up stiff resistance in some areas, but it was a losing battle. The rebels fought with a ferocity that surprised even seasoned observers. The key to the rebel victory was the element of surprise. Assad's intelligence services failed to detect the impending offensive. The rebels kept their plans secret. When the attack came, it was like a thunderbolt from a clear blue sky. The Syrian army was ill-prepared for a major offensive. Morale was low, corruption rampant, and many soldiers had lost faith. When the rebels struck, the Syrian army collapsed. Soldiers abandoned their positions and melted into the civilian population. Some even joined the rebels, adding to the chaos and disarray. To understand the fall of Aleppo, one must delve into the long and bloody history of the Syrian civil war. The conflict, which began in 2011 as a series of peaceful protests against Assad's rule, quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war. The Assad regime, brutal and uncompromising, responded to the protests with overwhelming force. The world watched in horror as Assad's security forces gunned down unarmed protesters in the streets. The images of the dead and wounded, many of them women and children, sparked outrage and condemnation from the international community. But Assad remained defiant, determined to crush the rebellion by any means necessary. The Syrian people, however, refused to be silenced. The brutal crackdown, far from extinguishing the flames of rebellion, only fueled them further. What began as peaceful protests quickly morphed into an armed insurgency. Ordinary Syrians, armed with whatever weapons they could find, took up arms against Assad's forces. The conflict quickly drew in regional and international actors, each with their own agendas and interests. Iran and Russia, staunch allies of the Assad regime, provided military and financial support. The United States, along with its Western and Arab allies, supported the Syrian opposition, providing them with arms and training. The fall of Aleppo marks a significant turning point in the Syrian civil war, but it is too early to say what the long-term implications will be. The situation on the ground remains fluid, with both sides regrouping and preparing for the next round of fighting. The rebels, now in control of Aleppo, face a daunting task. They must consolidate their gains, establish a functioning administration, and provide basic services to the city's war-torn population. They must also contend with the threat of a counter-offensive by Assad's forces, who are determined to reclaim their lost territory. The international community, for its part, must work to ensure that a lasting ceasefire is put in place. All sides must be brought to the negotiating table, and a political solution must be found that addresses the legitimate grievances of all Syrians.